F sharp, A sharp, revisited.
Hello everyone and welcome to F Sharp A Sharp Revisited, the music review podcast where we take a look at the new music releases and have a chat about what we think about them. I am Joe, the music critic supervillain, and with me is the closeted cheeky boy Nick.
No, you're getting worse at this. You make me cringe that little bit more every week.
Well, the thing is, if it's canon now that I like country music, you can damn well be a closeted cheeky boy.
I suppose fair's fair.
But anyway, we should just get into some music discussion, I think.
It's been too long, all 2 weeks. Itching to talk about some things music related.
So we've got an album called Daytona by Pusha T.
Is it Daytona or Daytona?
No idea.
Daytona. Daytona by Pusha T. That much we can agree on.
Yeah.
This is a new album from Pusha T, hip-hop rapper, artist, person,
Yes.
human being. I think we can agree on that as well. It's his third studio album. 7 tracks, 22 minutes long. Short album.
Short album, yes. Something that I quite appreciate sometimes.
Oh,
like
so
as you know, my favourite album of 2014 was Symphony of the Vampire, which was 7 tracks, albeit a little bit longer than this album here. And if you can get what you need into that kind of 20 to 30 minute length, then just have that 20 to 30 minute length.
Andrew Jackson Jihad's second album, arguably their best album, was only 28 minutes long, I believe, and probably all the better for it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate this album being short, not least because it means that I've got more time to do other things in my schedule. But I think that he manages to pack a fair amount into this short amount of time. The album doesn't feel unfinished like XXX Tentacion. His album was short and also felt incredibly unfinished, like a load of half-assed ideas just bundled together.
Because that was about 40 minutes, that album, wasn't it? And
yeah, and this one is very direct and engaging, and I think it's pretty interesting on repeat listens too, which the short length lends itself to quite a lot.
Yeah.
Just straight out, I've never listened to anything by Pusha T before,
Neither
except for his guest spots on Kanye West's My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, but none of his solo stuff. And I quite enjoyed this album. I think that Pusha T is very in command on this project. He seems to know exactly where he's going, and his flow in particular, I think really he can stand on his own with that.
I would say that's the best thing about this album, even if some of the lyrical topics I don't particularly care for.
Yeah.
Something that's always a pleasure to listen to on this album is just hear him rap. It's just hearing the phonetics that are coming out of his mouth. They're always easy to listen to, if you know what I mean.
And I think on top of that, the beats on the album are just full enough to carry any weaker moments he has in his delivery. That's one of my first problems on the album, is sometimes, as you've just said, don't really care for some of the topics on the album. I think sometimes what he's saying sort of falls by the way, and I get more interested in what's happening in the background at times.
I find that particularly on the first 2 tracks, which seem to be about drugs. I honestly don't...
They are about drugs.
I don't understand why so many rappers seem to think they're getting so much mileage rapping about drugs. I mean, maybe there are some interesting things to say, but...
I'm going to be honest here, Joe. You are about as far removed from that sort of culture as a boy from England can be. But I do understand what you mean. I think for the most part there is a good connection between his beats and his flow, but it needed to be a bit stronger, I think, for the album. I mean, granted, a lot of the shortcomings on the album don't really last for very long because the album itself isn't very long.
In fact, I would say there's only one track that I don't really like on this album. The rest are pretty great.
I'd feel the same way. Do you want to say what your least favourite track is?
Come Back Baby.
That's not mine. That's
really?
actually my favourite on the album.
Oh, so Nick, no.
I think that... Okay, we'll talk about Come Back Baby and then we'll talk about my least favourite. Personally, I love the usage of sampling on that album, sampling the Mighty Hannibal at the beginning and then the George Jackson chorus. I think the contrast between the soul elements in the chorus and intro and the sort of blunt rap verses are really pretty cool, and the references to addiction from those samples are very fitting considering some of the topics on the album. I will say it. In that sense, it sort of reminds me of Bump by Brockhampton, which I also really liked and you really didn't. So I'm sort of seeing the connection there.
I felt like the two different sections were jarring. It felt like there wasn't really a whole lot connecting them or making them relevant to each other, which to me just didn't gel.
Well, that's like your opinion.
I also thought like the lyrics probably weren't as strong on that track either. Not that they were bad, but for me that song didn't really do anything for me.
Well, going along the way of not so good lyrics, my least favourite track on the album was What Would Meek Do?
Yeah.
Mostly because I think Kanye's verse just reminds me of most of the reasons why I don't like him.
I've literally written down on my notes, Kanye's verse is the weakest part of this track. Yeah, it's probably my second least favourite.
I think it's probably the weakest part of the album to me. It's a brag track. Neither of us particularly fond of those. It feels weak from both parties on that front anyway. Especially, I don't know if you've listened to Pusha T's diss track of Drake, The Tale of Adidon.
I haven't, no.
It's fantastic. Drake did a diss track of Pusha T saying, I make more money than you, I've got better sales. And Pusha T came back and said, your dad left you when you were 4, you're doing the same thing now, you're a twat. Basically, it was great. And he spat so much savagery with that track, and I feel like he could have done more to big himself up here, knowing what he can do. As well as that, I think it's also probably the weakest backing on the album on that track as well.
It's just not quite as memorable, especially when there are actually quite some memorable backings on some of the tracks.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'll say my two favourite tracks now. Hard Piano. I love the piano riff on that track. And I just like the way the harmonies and the synths underneath that provide it so much great harmonic backing at the same time. It's one of those tracks that just feels really warm to listen to, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And strangely enough, that really works well with some of the biting lyrics that goes on that track as well. So
I do agree with Hard Piano having probably best backing on the album.
But also, Infrared, the closing track, was something I really enjoyed. The announcement in the backing, like someone singing through a speakerphone or something like that, that's what it sounds like. But it works very strangely well for the tone of the piece. It's a nice piece of experimental backing that it just really works for me.
I agree.
So, yeah.
Another good track. As far as Pusha T's lyrics go, I had a few points to make about that. I mean, I think his lyrics are often good, but sometimes it does feel like he's trying a little too hard. Sometimes it feels like he's so invested in one line that he's willing to sacrifice the next line to fit it in. The biggest one I could think of was actually at the start of Hard Piano, with the line, never trust a bitch who finds love in a camera, decent start. She will fuck you, then turn round and fuck a janitor.
Yeah.
I had to stop the track and go back and just go, wait. Did I just hear that right?
I actually think that lyric works, though. Maybe it doesn't for you, but...
It doesn't for me. I just think it's quite weak.
Yeah, but I do notice what you say. He does seem to put stock in certain one-liners in songs.
Yeah, he's a big fan of wordplay. Take a few examples. On Comeback Baby, you got we buy big boats, bitch, I'm Sinbad. Downright sinful, bitch, we being full. Also, I play musical chairs with these squares. Rich Flair before they was Ric Flairs. And then on If You Know, You Know, you got you ever been hit with the water weight, then had to wait. Do you water wait? He's very fond of those little moments, and I think most of the time they work quite well.
Yeah,
I enjoy them.
They're quite charming, really.
The final point that I really have to make is the guest rapping spots on the album. I think in general are pretty weak, though that might just be in comparison to Pusha T's delivery on the album. I don't find most... They sort of range from unmemorable to kind of bad.
I'd kind of agree, because the only one that stuck out to me was Kanye's, and that wasn't the best one, really. We haven't really talked much about the first two tracks, but both of them had like really nice backings.
You know.
Yeah, and although I would say that vocal sample in that song
does
get a little bit annoying, but the kind of harmonies that go with it are really nice, and I did enjoy the guitar and the brass stabs in the games we play as well. So I think there is a lot to enjoy in this album.
Yeah, I have to agree.
I can see myself returning to it sometime, but I still probably would cut out the two weaker tracks really from repeated listens.
I agree.
Personally.
I mean, but I do think it's an album I'd be happy to come back to, which is a big positive. And I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10.
Yes, same really, 7 out of 10.
Let's move on, but also kind of stick with this album a little bit, because another album came out recently, which is kind of very similar.
Yeah.
Daytona was nearly entirely produced by Kanye West, and it's seven tracks long, 22 minutes. Kanye West also released his new album, which is 7 tracks and 24 minutes. And I think there's a fair few similarities between the two, though I won't go into them too much because I want to talk about it as a standalone release. So this is Kanye West's 8th studio album, if you can believe that. And as far as parallels go, this is another album I don't think it feels unfinished in the same way, say, X's did. So positive there. Difference between this album and the other album, though, is that this one isn't particularly good.
Oh, boy. I didn't know what you were going to say, because this album seems to have had some mixed reactions.
Yeah.
I think I've got my thoughts on this album pretty well ironed out. I think there are 2 good tracks on it.
For me, the more I listen to this album, the more faults I find in it. Kind of the complete opposite of Daytona in that respect.
Okay. I just want to say something before you talk about this track, because I know I'm probably a terrible person for thinking this, but the opening track, I Thought About Killing You, I think is the funniest thing I've heard all year.
Oh, yeah, it's...
Like oh my goodness.
Yeah, he clearly thinks that he's... I mean, just on the album, appears to be this sincere desire for openness. And it's sometimes cool, sometimes it comes off as entitled ignorance, but on I Thought About Killing You, it's just this facade of a soul-searching poet with a desire for catharsis, but it just carries the complexity of dry Weetabix.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, you summed it up, but I just find it so funny. I thought about killing you.
Premeditated murder.
And I thought about killing myself, and I love myself. I love myself so much. Oh, it's the funniest thing I've heard. And it's just because he's so dedicated to his seriousness within that track that just makes it all the more deadpan to me.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's funnier every time I listen to it, because the first time I listened to it, I thought, okay, this is a bit odd, because it has this kind of the more ambience backing. It's more spoken word rather than, beats and rapping. And so I thought, okay, this is like something quite serious. Let's try and pass it. And I came away from it thinking, don't know what to make of that. But then third listen, I'm just laughing at it.
Yeah.
Fourth listen, I'm just continuing to laugh at it. It's just so bizarre.
I can't even say it's the worst track on the album because, I mean, it's not bad. It's just hilarious.
Oh, it's not. I wouldn't say it's the worst. It's hard to really rate a track when. Well, I find it hard to rate a track when all it does really is make me laugh. That's its own category.
Oh, I wish I could remember the name of the song now, but I'm sure you've heard the recent Kanye West song that goes shoopity boop.
Oh yeah.
On that one, I mean, I could kind of tell that he was that was quite a meta track. I feel like he knew what he was doing on that one, and he fully knew how bizarre it was. This one, I'm really not so sure. This one, I feel like he doesn't. I don't think he quite understands how much of a joke it is.
But then, what kind of cements it as the joke is the actual verse that comes in afterwards. I don't understand what he's going on about. He talks about calling up the Muslims, and then it just seems like this drop-in line that makes no sense. And I'm just sitting here I have no idea what he's talking about.
It does feel a bit like he tacked that on afterwards.
It's almost like maybe I can say something kind of that might stir up some controversy, but I don't want to. But I mean, I don't know why he'd think that, considering some of his antics recently.
We've spent a good long time just talking about the first track. Let's talk about some of the positives of this album, because I do think there are some.
Well, I think they're reserved exclusively to the final 2 tracks, personally.
Okay, well, I'll say some of my positives. I think Kanye's flow is actually pretty confident on the album, and actually pretty engaging to listen to at times if you don't pay too much attention to what he's saying.
I'll take that, yeah.
I'll also say I think Kanye's singing parts and more melodic vocal moments are better than every single guest spot, which I didn't expect. And some of the beats on the album are pretty cool and engaging, like Yikes, for example. I love the beat on that. Other times completely half-baked, like on All Mine.
Yeah, that was my least favourite track, All Mine.
It's almost my least favourite track,
It's
probably
like,
second
I
least.
like the hook, courtesy of Ant Clemens, but the rest of that track just didn't really do anything for me.
Sorry, going back to Ant Clemens, what is this sudden trend of falsetto vocals with just the worst diction?
Well, yeah, I couldn't understand what he said. I had to look those lyrics up, and they still didn't make a huge amount.
I mean, I don't get why this has suddenly become a trend. I'd even say, like with Brockhampton and Bareface, a lot of the time I find it very difficult to make out what he's even saying among the crooning.
Yeah. And I did notice, I think there was another point on the album, I can't remember, I didn't write it down which one it is. There's some falsetto singing where they're actually slurring the words.
Is that Jeremiah on Wouldn't Leave?
Yeah, I think it is.
Because I've written down that's the example of angelic vocals with terrible diction.
Well, the thing is, I was listening to it, and again, I was looking along the lyrics, because you can't make out what they're saying, and the lyrics just weren't matching up with the voice. It actually sounded like he'd taken something strong and was just slurring them entirely.
But I think the only good guest spot on the album is Charlie Wilson on No Mistakes, and it's so underused. He's barely in the song. He's only got a few lines, and they're very repetitive.
Okay.
But all the other guest spots, I just think are bad.
I will disagree on Ghost Town because that's my favourite track, but...
Oh no, Joe. Oh no. You think the guest spots on Ghost Town are good?
Yes.
Did you hear Kid Cudi?
Yes.
I mean, all of them except for 070 Shake are off key. They're just all bad.
That's kind of like the charm of the song.
This is boggling my mind because I had such headaches listening to that song. I'm sorry. I'll let you speak your case.
Okay, well, I mean, just to talk about the backing, I loved it. I loved the guitar tones. I loved its contrast against the jazzier backing. It works really nicely. And yeah, I liked Kid Cudi's hooks. And of course, 070 Shake's hooks at the end I thought were really nice as well. In fact, I probably like that song because Kanye's on it the least. If I'm going to be honest.
When I was listening to that song, especially the end, all I could think about was BoJack Horseman just holding his hand over the flame and just saying nothing on the inside, nothing on the outside. And it was about as humorous for me. I
mean, the lyrics are very kind of indulgent, I suppose you could say, but it was fine for me.
I think Kanye's flow on that is just really bland with all the melodic inflections. It's just aren't necessary. And the final line, which is just repeated far too many times, that I feel kind of free, we're still the kids we used to be. I put my hand on a stove to see if I still bleed and nothing hurts anymore. It doesn't feel like a reflection to me. It just feels more like he's condoning self-harm. That was me personally, my feeling. I'm sure other people will get something different out of it.
I mean, I got something different, but I suppose that is what it is. Before just saying something about the final track, which I did actually quite like, one problem I had with this album is the thematic consistency of it. Because you'd think with a shorter album, I think I would have assumed it's easier to either have some kind of narrative going through it that makes sense from start to finish, but I did not like the way the themes of this album flowed at all.
I mean, I didn't realise they did.
Because we've talked about the first track, we won't dwell on it too much, but that's very much going into Kanye's mindset that, he's this person with this deep inner mind that considers all these dark thoughts and whatever. And then Yikes is, I suppose, generic rap topics. But then after those two tracks, there does seem to be a kind of story being told about kind of Kanye's relationship with women. You've got All Mine, which is basically about treating women like sexual objects, and then just an immediate flip-flop into Wouldn't Leave. It's like it's like demonstrating a completely opposite mindset, like he can't live without whichever woman he's talking about, and No Mistakes seems to be saying the same message. But then it feels like he's trying to contrast these two songs without actually demonstrating any kind of epiphany, if you know what I mean, like any
Yeah.
kind of character
I think
kind of
that's
progression, or
it. Sort of comes on Violent Crimes. He's talking about how now that
yeah,
I've had a child, my whole perception's
yeah.
changed. But surely that should have come a bit earlier in
Well,
the album to
that's
really
yeah.
make that shift
Well,
work.
that's what I was thinking, because Ghost Town changes the topic again. Then the final track kind of goes back to this theme, and I'm just not sure how satisfying it is. I mean, as I like Violent Crimes as a track on its own, if you know what I mean. Like, if this is Kanye's experience, then that's his experience, and the way he puts it across on that song, I think is actually quite well put. But
Yeah.
as a conclusion to what seems to be an incredibly disjointed narrative within those 3 or 4 tracks, just felt odd to me. It didn't feel very planned out at all.
I have to agree with you there. I don't have anything else to say, just agree. I guess I'll talk about my favourite song then, as you've talked about yours.
Yep.
Yikes. I think that the backing is quite unnerving on that track, which really fits with the lyrics about addiction again. And I think his flow on that track is probably his most engaging on the album. It's also got some of my favourite lyrics on the album and also some of my least favourite. So it's got tweaking off that 2CB her. Is he gonna make it TBD her? Thought I was gonna run DMC her. I done died and lived again on DMT her. I like that. I thought that flowed really well. But then sort of straight after you've got Russell Simmons wanna pray for me too. I'ma pray for him because he got hashtag me too'd. That made me want to scream. Just treating the Me Too movement like it's some sort of STI is just. I want
That's Kanye.
Classic Kanye.
Oh dear.
Like I said though, just sometimes his lyrics and his sincere desire for openness come off as entitled ignorance.
To be honest though, I do actually like the honesty. I just don't think it's communicated in a way that demonstrates any real depth of character. And maybe that's the point. Maybe his character isn't all that deep in the end, but I don't know.
Perhaps. I'd give this album a strong 4.
Same.
It's not the worst thing I've heard. It's also very flawed and not great.
I think it's incredibly flawed. For me, it's Ghost Town and Violent Crimes are the only tracks that I want to come back to enjoy, and then the first track I'll listen to if I want a good laugh.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to come back to this album, to be honest.
Oh, definitely not.
I was listening to it on Spotify, and then it switched over to the first track of My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and I just instantly thought, oh, this is better. It's just such a sudden change in quality. I don't know what happened.
But this goes back to our point that if you're having a short album, like usually that's a good chance to like trim the fat on whatever material you've produced. Say if you've produced say a regular album's worth, but you've got 7 great tracks, maybe 5 or so mediocre tracks. In theory, you should have a 7-track album that's much consistently higher in quality, but it just seems to have not happened here at all.
I'd like musicians to go back to the days when albums were a bit shorter, to be honest. I think a lot of albums nowadays are a bit too bloated. Unless you're writing an epic or a concept album, or you're doing a Kamasi Washington and just releasing all of the material in one album. I don't think albums generally need to be that long. I feel like it's just something that musicians have gotten used to. Like, it's the same with the loudness war, with songs being like a lot more full on than they used to be. If you listen to, like, I was listening to Kate Bush the other day and just comparing it to whatever came on next. I think it was Pusha T actually, and one was just so much quieter than the other.
I think that's always going to be, now that we've gotten as loud as we have, that's always going to be the norm now. People want to be as loud as they can for attention.
I mean, I know
at least for the mainstream.
I know that if music is louder, you can generally pick up more in it, but I also think that it just kind of crushing music together like that,
it's not great. What I will say about album length, I want artists not to think about it too much in as much as I want them to write albums that are the length they should be. If they have a story that should be told over 50 minutes, write the 50 minutes. But if especially when I hear albums that just have weaker tracks on them, they're over that length.
Just don't feel obligated to write a 50-minute long album. Don't do a Kendrick and make all but one of your albums over an hour long. You know, I mean, he can get away with it because he's good, but
yeah, not everyone is.
Not everyone is.
Spoiler alert.
Let's move on. We're done with that.
Yeah.
I've arranged a quiz for you, Joe.
Yay!
Which is going to be great. It's going to be
I am
amazing.
looking forward to this.
So, I had this wonderful idea while I was messing around with Cubase, which was, what if I take Joe's favourite songs and make them sound horrible? So I've taken some songs that I know Joe likes, and I have put various effects and processes on them to try and make them just sound not completely indistinguishable, but different.
Yeah.
I've done 6 of them. We're going to see if Joe can work out what they are. I know you've injured your wrist.
Yes.
So what I'm going to say is that if you get 4 or more, I have to cover something of your choice. If you get less, I don't.
Okay.
Simple as. Because I'm not going to force you to.
And I'll make you cover something nice then, seeing as you're being nice to me.
Here comes the first of the 6.
That's Trains by Porcupine Tree.
It is Trains by Porcupine Tree. You have got one right.
Fantastic track.
I have made it so that the songs will get harder as they go on.
Okay.
As much as I think they are.
That's Sorry Miss Jackson by Outkast.
I'll take that. It's just called Miss Jackson, but
yes.
You have got that one right. That's 2.
That's Kate Bush, Running Up That Hill.
I knew you would get that one.
Oh, this is fun.
Oh, that was one I was sure you would get.
I know it's Muse, but I couldn't place the song.
Oh.
What is wrong with me? I'm trying to place that melody in my head.
You have 5 seconds. 4, 3.
Hypochondriac
2,
music?
1.
No, I know that's not right.
It was Citizen Erased.
That sounded nothing like Citizen Erased.
It's because I played it backwards and put on like 50 different like flanges and phases and.
I knew it was something Origin of Symmetry era.
It was originally harder. It was originally the guitar solo part, but played backwards and just horribly distorted.
But that is one of my favourite songs.
It is the best Muse song.
I'm bitterly disappointed in myself.
It does have a very memorable opening.
Yeah. That riff.
Tuning that guitar string down to like drop A is amazing.
Yeah. Oh, and that harmonic.
Yeah. And, just everything about that track is amazing. I think probably Matthew Bellamy's best guitar solo as well. It just works.
Among his best.
Anyway,
easily.
Moving on. You need to get one more right of the next 2.
Okay. To me, that sounded like it could be Björk, but...
It wasn't Björk.
Okay.
5, 4, 3, 2...
I can't place it.
That was Sing to the Moon by Snarky Puppy and Laura Bueller.
Did you put something backwards on it and that made it?
No, it was just incredibly slow with a step filter on.
Wow.
And
can I hear that again?
Sure, I'll put it on now.
I can kind of hear it now. I don't think I would have ever got that though. I love that track. It's one of my favourites from, was it 2015 that?
It was one of the harder ones.
Oh.
But you've just got to get the next one right then.
Oh,
and the next one could go either way. I don't think it's necessarily the hardest effects and processes wise. It's just a case of, well,
yeah, we'll see. That's moving on up.
That is moving on up. That was you playing the bass guitar on that track.
I recognise the bass solo. Wow. I did not expect that at all. Oh, I was trying so hard to place that, and then suddenly, like, light bulb moment.
I did wonder whether you would recognise that was me playing the guitar and you playing the bass.
Yeah. That was so much fun. Doing that cover, and it's a great song as well.
It is a fantastic
great song.
Back when Joe and I were in college, and we were both young men, we were in the quote-unquote soul band.
The soul band that played no
soul music whatsoever, and we played two concerts, but we played the same songs for both, and we played a cover of Town Called Malice by The Jam.
Yeah.
Only the Good Die Young by Queen, which was one of our vocalists' choice to remember her mother. And then I said, we're going to do Moving On Up by Primal Scream, You Have No Choice. And we did, and it was fantastic. And I broke a string halfway through the set. It was great.
Yeah. Oh, that was a great time.
Yeah.
I remember being super chuffed because I managed to put quintuplets into my bass solo.
My uncle, who worked in a recording studio, they were testing out some new equipment, and they said, do you have a band? Would you like to come and play music so we can test stuff out? And we got a small EP out of it. What songs did we do for it? We did Moving On Up, Town Called Malice, In the Airplane Over the Sea, and Send Me On My Way by Rusted Root. It was a great time.
It was fun.
I'm just going to turn the speaker off. You have to listen to the noise it makes. I love that. Okay, so you passed that quiz, Joe, and
I passed barely.
You have to think of a song for me to cover. So I'll wait till the end of the thing if you don't have one in mind. Okay, well we'll carry on with the podcast for now. You can tell me what it is at the end.
Yeah.
Let's go back to talking about albums. We've done the two obligatory hip-hop albums for our podcast. Let's move into some more guitar-based fare with the new album by Father John Misty called God's Favourite Customer. If you didn't already know, he's blown up over the years, but Father John Misty is an American singer-songwriter, former drummer of the Fleet Foxes, would you believe? This is his fourth studio album. It is 10 tracks long and 39 minutes. This is coming just about a year after his last effort, Pure Comedy, which neither Joe nor I cared for. It was a very adventurous album, very long album, a very bleak album.
A very bloated and pretentious album.
Very bloated and pretentious album. This one is much more manageable. It's only, like I've said, 39 minutes, 10 tracks long. First things first, it's not as adventurous as his previous album, and it's all the better for it. I do feel, it's great he's trying to break new ground. I feel like all artists should be trying to do that. But at the same time, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, I guess. Pure Comedy may have been bloated, smug, and self-congratulating, but at least it felt like he was trying to do something. But I have no qualms with him playing it a bit safe here.
This album, I like it less and less every time I listen to it, though.
I like it more and more every time I listen to it, but
this will be a fun argument.
I can completely understand why you will have problems with it. I kind of guessed you would.
I mean, maybe that's just a product of it playing it safe. For me, because, when I first listened to this album, I did actually really enjoy it, but it's just on those repeated listens and trying to pay close attention to this album where I found myself getting uninterested, really. A little bit bored, and that probably is a product of him playing it a bit safe.
For me, the first time I listened to the album, I thought, this is pretty boneless. It's boneless Father John Misty. And while I thought some of the tracks on it were decent, I didn't find it all that interesting. Gave it a bit of time, listened to it again, thought, okay, this isn't bad at all. Maybe I was being a bit harsh on it. And then I looked into the lyrics for it and suddenly realised that actually I'm kind of wondering if Father John Misty needs a hug. I'd be willing to give him one, because some of the parts on this album just left me feeling quite chilled, I guess. Not in the sense of, oh, I feel quite chill, man, in the sense of, oh god. I guess the good thing about this album for me is that God's Favourite Customer is it takes a more introspective and contained route, as opposed to Pure Comedy, where he was critiquing society. On this, it's all about him.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's no getting past it. Father John Misty is a very pretentious artist. Josh Tillman writes very indulgent and pretentious songs. But I think when it's speaking about his own character rather than his views on other things, it's a lot more manageable.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because I overall, I definitely enjoyed this album more than I did Pure Comedy. And, I do want to talk about the positives. I do think the album should have ended after the first 3 tracks, but those those 3 tracks are some good tracks, really.
They are very good tracks.
I mean, my favourite was the 3rd track, Just Dumb Enough to Try.
That's one of my favourite tracks as well.
The use of the arpeggiated guitar over the melancholic piano was so good. I just wish some of the other compositions were that as good on the album, but it's just so perfectly melancholic for the kind of message that he's going for in that song.
I mean, the guitar solo on it sounds like it's ugly crying, which I think is very fitting for the
song.
And
it works. Yeah. It really works.
The song deconstructs all of his positive points. Each verse starts with him saying, "This is something that's good about me, but..." Yeah. And then goes on to just completely tear it all down. And
the vocal performance is great as well on that track.
The lyrics in relation to... I mean, something I noticed on the entire album is that he makes great use of the second person, using the term you, and could be talking about all manner of different people, most often his wife, I assume. And on this song, the lyrics breaking down his character in relationship to whoever the song is about, it's brilliant. I love it. Going on with the talking about you as a person, the more I look into this album and the more I learn about the context around it, the more the you just takes on different meaning with each new thing I learn. Like, please don't die, I originally assumed, it was just from his perspective talking about his wife or whatever. Turns out it's actually meant to be from the point of view of his wife, and Josh Tillman spent 2 months in a hotel having a delusional, depressive episode. And the track Please Don't Die really highlights how bad this is, and it is from the perspective of his wife just trying to talk him back from the edge. And when I that track, when I was listening to it the first few times, I thought, this is fine. Learning it from that point of view, I wondered whether it was a bit presumptuous of him to take on the persona of his wife, but I think it actually works very well.
Well, it's something he toys with later on in the album as well, in the songwriter.
Yeah. The songwriter is very much about his wife, I think. That song's almost like an apology, apologising for using his music as his sort of therapist, I guess, and making their personal life so public.
I would say that probably has one of my favourite lyrics on the album. Would you undress me repeatedly in public to show how very noble and naked I could be?
I do love that line.
That was very introspective.
My personal favourite track line on that track is the final one, which is, what would it sound like if you were the songwriter and loving me was your unsung masterpiece? I think that's just a lovely line. I think that nearly always the lyrics are one of the strongest points on this album.
I'm going to disagree.
Okay, then.
Sometimes there are good lyrics. Sometimes the lyrics take me out of the music completely. I mean, let's talk about what I think is the worst track on the album, The Palace.
I think that's my favourite track, but go on.
Okay. It's always the way. Last night I wrote a poem. Man, I must have been in the poem zone.
But that's the point. The bad lyrics written there really highlights the last two lines of "I'm in over my head." It's deliberately there. This poem zone is a way of him dealing with the pain, but it's so clearly just having a negative effect on him. The writing of the bad line is key to that.
It's really not.
Well, that's your opinion, man.
And later on in the song, it makes me laugh every time I listen to it. He says the line, "I texted your iPhone," which to me just seems like such an unnecessary detail that it just comes across as a product placement, and that takes me out of the song every time I listen to it.
I will agree, it's an unnecessary detail. It didn't really take me out of the song as such.
But then the arrangement of the Palace, I don't really have any time for it. I mean, it's piano chords. It sounds like it's trying to be a Radiohead piano ballad, but without anything all that distinct about it, if I'm going to be honest.
Well, I think the distinct part of the song is meant to be the emphasis on his voice, and I think that on that song it's one of the most beautifully sorrowful performances I think he's ever done. And I think that if the piano was more complicated, it would take away from that. I think on top of that, I think that the sort of I don't know if this is just me, but I got sort of strong Buddha imagery on it. You know the story of Buddha, how Buddha was originally kept inside Palace by his father to just keep him away from all of the pain and suffering of the outside world so he wouldn't have to experience it. I thought that came across in this song, and I liked that reference.
I can't say I noticed it, but maybe that's my lack of intelligence speaking.
Do you want to hear about my least favourite track on the album?
Which is it?
Guess.
Well, The Palace was my least favourite. My second least favourite was Date Night.
That's my least favourite. I do not like Date Night at all. I think the chord progression in it is just so bad. The opening with the guitar playing, it's just weird. Repeatedly going back to the same chords with nothing particularly compositionally or instrumentally exciting to back that up. Plus the production on that song it just sucks.
I found production to be a problem on that track and on a few other tracks on this album.
I will agree. On Disappointing Diamonds are the rarest of them all, I had problems with the production. But carrying on with Date Night for a bit, why has he panned the drums all the way to one side? So every time that ugly snare drum hits, it gives me a headache. Also, the lyrics of the song just completely take me out of the flow of the themes of the album. It just doesn't fit for me.
Do you want to go to the farm, Nick?
No. I want to go to the next song.
Do you want to go to the park? I'll get you an ice cream.
I don't get this song. I do not get this song. I don't get why it's there. And it just gets me a bit annoyed thinking about it.
Yeah, I do get annoyed with that track, but I do think some of my problems with that track do seep into some of the other tracks. I do find his compositional style to be pretty much all pastiche and not really a whole lot original, if I'm going to be honest. And to me, that made the album as a whole less interesting, even if there are moments here and there. Well, I particularly noticed in the first few tracks, really, that were quite vibrant, quite interesting. I could name just as many tracks which I can't say had anything instrumentally good going on, really.
I can understand that point.
But I just want to note about the production, because, well, the problems I had with it was that there are some tracks, like Date Night, that don't really have that many instruments in it, but they feel so crowded together.
Oh, yeah. That's my main problem with Disappointing Diamonds, are the rarest of them all. Everything just feels so compressed, and if you don't have decent headphones on, it just sounds so messy.
It does. Personally speaking, when I listen to music, I like to be able to hear everything that's going on. I want to hear how all the instruments are relating to each other, and I like to hear clarity, basically, is what I like to hear in music. And maybe that's just not what he was going for here. But when I'm listening to a song like, I kind of liked the composition for Disappointing Diamonds, but when you're trying to pick out certain things, but the way it all sounds so crowded makes it so impossible to hear, I just found it frustrating, really.
I agree. Simple as. But I do think that I will disagree with your point about the compositions to a point, because I think on most of the songs I have some problems with, there are compositional or production choices that do make up for it. Like Mr. Tillman was one I was on the fence with for quite a long time, because while I think the lyrics are quite funny on that track, it's very repetitive, and I'm not sure how much time I have for it. But whenever I listen to it carefully, there are those synth tones in it, and I think that they're so good.
Yeah.
They're so sly.
I like the synths that kind of double with the melody as well. I do like Mr. Tillman. I think it's a good track, so I'll agree with you on that one.
And I think that the production on some of the bigger tracks, like just Dumb Enough to Try, I think it's got such a lush composition and tone, and everything just fits together on that track.
What I will say about another track, Please Don't Die, I've actually made a note here. That's another track that sounded really dense, but there's a moment where like the denseness kind of fades away, and we get introduced to this harmonica against the guitar and the piano, and it all sounds like lovely and clear. And that's a moment I really enjoyed on that song, probably because of that moment of clarity.
Well, my favourite moment on the album is actually in the first track, Hang Out at the Gallows, and it's just the bit where he delivers the line, "What's your politics? What's your religion?" And he does that wonderful high note.
Yeah, the Michael Jackson impression. What's your religion?
Yeah. What's your politic? What's your religion?
Nice. Yeah, that was fun. And that also probably had my favourite lyric on the album, whose bright idea was it to sharpen the knives.
Yeah, that's great.
It's a nice biting lyric. I did enjoy that.
And I love how there's a bit where all of the instrumentation cuts out so he can deliver the "What's your politics? What's your religion?" line, but with a drum fill over the top of it. It's great.
It's a well orchestrated song. Great opener, really.
Josh Tillman really, he knows his range and he knows how to use it. So it's very rare that I'm disappointed by his vocal performance. We've talked about this album for quite a long time, so I think we should wrap it up by giving scores.
Okay. Just one last point. I didn't too much care for the last two tracks. I don't know how much into detail I want to go, other than I don't think he was saying like the most interesting things on those two tracks.
What, the songwriter?
On the songwriter, yeah, he doesn't really... I like the concept, but he doesn't really seem to explore it in much depth.
I disagree. I think he goes into enough depth. I think if he'd gone on much longer, it would have felt like a bloated song. But
I would have liked more depth out of it.
I get where you come from. I agree with you on the final track. The final track doesn't say much at all, though I do love how he delivers the final line, why not me, why not you, why not now? I think that's a good point, but the rest of the track is a bit...
Yeah.
And I would give this album a strong 7.
I'm kind of on the strong 5, light 6 range to it. I don't think it's an album I'm going to come back to aside from the first 3 tracks, which give me what I want from it.
And that's perfectly okay.
Yeah. Nick isn't going to kill me afterwards.
No. I mean, I think you should go and listen to I Love You, Honey Bear, because that album's lovely.
I mean, perhaps I should. I think not having liked pure comedy and not really being sold on this album.
I Love You, Honey Bear is just an album about love. And it's got some...
I don't experience love,
It's
Nick.
got some wonderfully dark lyrics on it. I mean, the first track has got everything is doomed and nothing will be spared, but I love you, honey bear. So maybe you'll dig that.
It's quite funny, actually.
Well, let's move on to our final album of the podcast, which is... Can you pronounce it? Because I'm going to get it wrong.
Noonday Dream by Ben Howard.
Yeah, I've kept saying that wrong all day.
Noonday Dream.
Yeah.
And it's the longest album we're talking about this podcast.
51 minutes, 10
a traditional 50-minute album.
10 tracks. Third studio album from the UK singer-songwriter. I've heard good things about Ben Howard, and I've heard tracks in passing before, which have made me think, I should check this guy out. He seems like my sort of dude. So here we are with his new album, which is full of just songs that fill all of the available space.
Yes.
This album is just crammed. I mean,
yeah.
Even the lighter compositions are still just very expansive through his love of reverb and ambient drones.
I found it very consistent as well with the dynamics, and when it is getting more dynamic, it's only getting lightly more dynamic, if you know what I mean. And then it's not one of those albums that has high peaks and troughs. It kind of fairly level, I would say.
I sort of get that, but I do think sometimes the songs go a bit overboard on the compression, and it does feel like everything is fighting to breathe. Only sometimes.
I didn't get that so much, but
for an artist who's clearly trying to give every instrument their own space and purpose, that was a bit disappointing to me. But it didn't happen very often. And going off your point of how things only rise and fall very slightly, that was sometimes an issue for me, because I felt like some tracks often felt like they were building up to this huge, satisfying climax, but they were a bit limited by the production and then sort of retreated just before getting there, which always just left me wanting more.
Okay. I didn't experience that so much. I think maybe I was treating it more as an atmospheric album, but I think the effect of that not having many peaks and troughs I did kind of feel it towards the end of the album, where I felt like the final 2 tracks didn't really cover any ground that previous tracks didn't. And
one of my points on this album is that it should have ended after track 8.
Yeah, I actually really like that song, A Boat to an Island.
That's one of my favourite.
I really like that.
A Boat to an Island on the Wall and A Boat to an Island Part 2 / I Get the Song are my favourite 2 tracks on the album.
Yeah, I have other favourites, but those 2 are among them, so yeah.
I mean, going back to what you said about it being a more sort of atmospheric listen, I mean, I agree. And I think that this album benefits most from if you're not trying to pay too much attention to everything that's going on, if you just let it wash over to you.
Well, I think you can pay attention, but just try and relax in it like a bubble bath.
Yeah. As well as that, I think that Ben Howard's voice on the album, in contrast to Father John Misty, he never tries to make a big show of it. His voice is sort of somewhat underwhelming, but he uses it to pretty good effect by moulding it around his compositions in a very gentle manner.
Yeah, I think I would agree. One point I do want to make about the album is, just kind of going off of that, is the lyrics. I don't know how much you paid attention to the lyrics.
I looked,
but I kind of struggled with them. I think I compare this album very much to Fleet Fox's record last year, in as much as when I'm reading along with the lyrics, I find beautiful moments within them, but then actually trying to put them together and get like a narrative or meaning out of them, it lost me.
Well, I felt like the lyrics were, they were pretty good, but I never felt like I was ever given a reason to care about them in the songs. It was more how he was speaking than what he was saying.
Yeah, let me just read out some lyrics so the listeners kind of know what we're going on about. Love is under the early mornings, in the shadows under the trees, not in the cuckolded ashes, floating down from the rookery. I mean, those are beautiful words, but I'm not sure exactly what they mean. That's coming from the song Towing the Line.
As far as I could get, there is a bit of a theme on the album, and some of it is to do with a relationship that fell apart due to some sort of affair that happened abroad, I think. And there's also this sort of earnest desire throughout the album to live life and squeeze out every drop of life you can, which may have led to the affair, possibly. But that is entirely speculation. I haven't got a fucking clue.
Yeah, I couldn't look that far into it. Every time I really tried to focus on the lyrics, I found my attention being diverted, really.
I think I enjoy the album more if I try and ignore the lyrics.
Same.
It's not that they're bad, it's that I just don't care about them.
Yeah. So moving on from that, I do think there are some interesting compositional choices in this album. I mean, I think the opening track really stood out to me because you've got Ben Howard's voice, but then it's layered on a bed of backing auto-tune voices, which sounds horrible in this kind of weird blend of kind of folk and ambient electronica that this album is. But I thought it worked really well. It sounded odd, but in a way that it kind of seemed like it was supposed to sound odd, and I quite enjoyed the quirkiness of it.
I did like the first track. I'm just going to get to my main problem with the album just straight away now, which is that I have a lot of half ideas about most of these tracks, but I couldn't tell you how any of them sounded from the top of my head. I find it very difficult to... the only part of the album I completely remember is and I don't even know what instrument it is. I couldn't tell in A Boat to an Island on the Wall whether it was a distorted synth or a guitar. that plays through the majority of the second half of the track over his vocals. That was the only bit of the album that stood out to me.
Yeah, I wrote down, I really like the weird melodic layering.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you what instrument it is, which is cool. It's a good sound, and I think it fits quite well on the song.
I will agree with you that I can't remember a whole lot of like the specific kind of instrumentation and composition, but to me that's not so much an issue, because when I'm sitting down and listening to it, I am really enjoying it. To me, it's not so important that I remember it, more so than I am enjoying it in the moment.
Yeah, I have to agree to an extent. While I'm listening to the album, I do get enjoyment out of it as I'm listening to it, but I want to feel like I've gotten something out of it at the end. And most of the time I'll get to an end of a track and just sort of think, oh, well, that happened.
Yeah, I see that point of view, but I guess we just disagree a bit on that.
We disagree on these things, it's all fine.
We'll eventually find an album that we agree on.
I think it's a great album to listen to with a sort of half-bored commitment. I find it a little difficult to hold attention for long periods, but there is a lot of subtlety in there, which if you're willing to spend the time, you can pick out. There are these really pitch-perfect, groovy drums on the song The Defeat, which I'm quite fond of. But that's just what I've written down, and I can't remember how they go.
Well, I think I enjoyed this album more consistently than you did, because pretty much all the tracks up until the last two where I felt like it was getting too long, I had things that I enjoyed about them. I really enjoyed his compositional style. I mean, perhaps I just don't know many artists that are similar to him, but I really enjoyed the combinations of sound, because I was hearing the folk elements, I was hearing the electronic elements, and there was familiarity to them, but it was presented in a way that I hadn't really heard before all that much. So that's something I did really enjoy about the album, and I do actually see myself returning to it.
Yeah, I think I can see myself returning to it as well. Should we talk about some of our favourite tracks?
Well, I've got so much green. I mean, we've already talked about a boat on the island on the wall, and the second part. I love the second part because
the second part's a real slow burner.
It's a slow burner, but you've got this like distorted, presumably synth sound or bass sound.
I was amazed by how surprisingly heavy that track is at parts, but it's never overwhelming. It's like you can see this tidal wave coming towards you, and it never quite hits, but you've got the experience of knowing it's there. Or
it's hitting you slowly.
Yeah. It's kind of blissful to listen to, actually, and it's definitely where the album should have ended. Because I think that the way that it fades out, it's like, it's not the big climax to end the album, it's the slow release to let you go.
The upbeat track, Someone in the Doorway, had those eerie electronic sounds with those upbeat drums, and that was that burst of energy that we kind of needed towards the middle of the album. That was really nice to listen to. And then The Defeat, which comes, in the second half, was really lovely and ominous. I really enjoyed that track. And so a track like Murmurations coming at the end almost felt like a reprisal of it, but a bit unnecessary. But again,
a bit long.
Yeah. But the tracks that came before the last, they're pretty consistently great in my view.
My issue with There's Your Man was there were these strange vocal rhythms and drum patterns that don't really mesh throughout it, and otherwise it's like you said, it's just no more interesting than any of the other songs from the album. And I guess, if I'm a bit biased, the fact that it's the song that came after the song which I think should have ended the album is always going to be a negative for me. I mean, I guess I'll finish up my points by saying the title Noonday Dream is very fitting for the tone of the album. If you like the title, you'll probably like how the album sounds.
It has that very ethereal quality. I really enjoyed this album overall. I don't think it's perfect, but I really enjoy it. In fact, like Fleet Foxes, I ranked that number 20, I think, in my top albums of last year. I could see an album like this making a similar ranking, really.
Oh, that's good. I don't know if I need to listen to this album more, if I need to give it more time between listens, because I find myself having to fight for points as why I like it, but I also do want to fight to make those points. So at the moment, I'd probably give this like a strong 6, but with repeated listens, it could go up or down. Hopefully up, because I do want to like this album and there's a lot of admirable stuff about it.
Yeah, I like this album, and I think it might just be for its unique ethereal qualities. I'm giving it a strong 7 to maybe a light 8.
I would recommend you listen to A Boat to an Island on the Wall. It's the lead single of the album anyway. Yeah. While I was listening to it, I thought, I bet this is the lead single. It turned out it was.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, the build-up and then the distorted solo for me is probably the high point of the record, so you've got that.
Yeah.
Let's finish off, because we've been talking about 4 albums, 2 of which are very short, and we've somehow managed to go on for nearly 10 minutes longer than we usually do.
Oh, great. I need to pick a song.
Yeah, so I will sort of describe my feelings on Ducks while you think of a song. Starting off with Pusha T's Daytona, thinking that duck is going to get... I'd give him probably a slice of bread. I'd give him a bigger slice of bread if we were talking about his diss track, because it's great. But no, just single slice of bread. Kanye West, he probably gets a pat on the head for some good ideas, but it's going to be a very, at least you tried pat on the head.
I'm warning shotting Kanye, I think. Even though I do like Ghost Town and Violent Crimes.
If I can just pull out the feathers that were responsible for Ghost Town, I would. Moving on, we've got God's Favourite Customer, Father John Misty, probably my album of the week. I would give him a hug. I don't want to give him bread, I just want to give him a hug.
You like albums where you want to give the singer a hug, don't you?
I don't like albums where I want to give the singer a hug, because I just feel really sad for the artist. I don't want Josh Tillman to be sad. I don't want anyone to be sad.
I'll give him bread for the songs that I liked, but I'm going to give him, I don't know, Lears for the songs I didn't like.
The only artist that I would want to be sad is the Cheeky Girls. I hope they are very sad right now.
He's a cheeky boy.
And we've just talked about Noonday Dream. I told you I'd get it wrong again.
By Ben Howard.
I'll give him a small slice of bread.
I'm giving him some good bread. I'm looking forward to revisiting his album more, I think.
As far as other albums that were released, I haven't listened to any. Simple as. I listened to a track by an artist that I think is pretty good. I discovered him through a Facebook page, and he is an acoustic emo artist. Milo Dune. Very small to the point that he's probably not on Spotify. I brought his album from Bandcamp. It's called Incongruity, and it has a track on it called Part 2, The Reason I'm Grateful, which is a breakup song about moving on and not being bitter, which is refreshing. So, yeah, I'll listen to the album at some point. It might be good, it might be bad, but that song in particular I recommend you listen to. Joe, I'm running out of things to say. Please find something.
How would you feel about covering the theme to Season 2 of Pokemon? That's the Pokemon Johto theme.
If you send me a link to it, then I will try my damnedest.
I mean, the first season has that iconic theme, but I do love the second one. The very best that no one ever was. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, sure, I'll cover the Johto theme. You can expect that on the next podcast, but for now, I have been Nick.
I've been Joe.
And this has been too long a podcast. I'm so sorry. Bye.
Bye.
F sharp. A sharp.